New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Enif, Zenith Jump Point, July 13th, 3152. 3 jump ships sat side by side, as close as they could be with their sails unfurled. If it weren't for the half-dozen aerospace fighters flying patrol around them, it would have looked as if they were frozen in time. The Rabbit's Foot's Chimishu-class frame floated in contrast to the pair of Invader-class jump ships named Kikumaru and Nara. Each of the Draconis Combine ships was painted dark blue with red accents, which made the Rabbit's Foot stand out all the more in its light gray and metallic blue. On the bridge of the Rabbit's Foot, Rin and Cal stood at the holotable and patiently waited. At least Rin was patiently waiting. Cal was tugging at his dress uniform's collar, annoyed by the stuffy nature of this whole affair. "Knock it off. When this starts, no unprofessionalism," Rin said. Her own white collar was pristine along with the tightly braided red hair under her captain's cap. Cal let go of the collar and frowned when he noticed the comms officer, Miri, looking at him with a smirk. "At least I clean up okay," Cal responded, turning back to the table just as twin holographic projections appeared over the table. Both of the DCMS naval officers looked like they were posing for official photos. Not a single hair was out of place. The first to speak was a female officer who looked maybe 10 years older than Rin, with a white streak of otherwise jet black hair. Her face showed the wrinkles acquired through a lifetime of leadership. She said, "Welcome to the Enif system. I am Captain Mai Tanabe of the 43rd Galadon Regulars, and my ship, the Kikumaru, will be taking the lead on this expedition. I trust you have looked over the mission documents I have transmitted upon your arrival in system." "Yes, Captain," Rin responded quickly before continuing. "I am Captain Rin Barrett, and this is Lieutenant Cal Levitt, my second in command." The second DCMS captain was considerably younger, and by Rin's guess looked to be in his late 30s. His voice was crisp and was painted with confidence as he said, "I am Captain Yosh Seno, also of the 43rd Galadon Regulars. My ship is the Nara. I am honored to be included in this mission." Skipping ahead through the rest of the pleasantries, Captain Tanabe then said, "I would like our communications team to get to know each other on our journey. If the data you have accumulated on this last resort is accurate, we will need to be able to communicate when we can and be prepared for contingencies. I believe that we have an edge should they seek to interfere with sensors upon our arrival in system." Rin nodded and added, "Absolutely. I just wish to reiterate that my team is here as a guide, and though we can defend ourselves, we are not to be proactive about it. We're not looking to pick a fight. I believe there still may be a diplomatic solution." Both DCMS captains nodded before Captain Tanabe responded, "You're welcome to seek that outcome, though we are here to put a button on it should they seek another violent confrontation. Where that point is up to our discretion. We will not risk Combine assets if a threat is presented." "I understand, Captain." It was Rin's turn to nod as she replied. "We'll be ready to jump in 8 hours. Please keep us notified of your recharge status so that we can be underway," Captain Tanabe said. "Yes, Captain," Rin said as both the DCMS officers disconnected their links. Once she was sure that the connection was closed, she let out a sigh and looked over at Cal. He smiled and said, "That went pretty well. I think they like me." Rin rolled her eyes and replied, "Careful, I might trade you for one of their stoic junior officers." New Explorer Corps, First Arm, 2 jumps from Enif, July 25th, 3152. Vasil wasn't fazed by the jump disorientation. He learned long ago to pick a location on a far wall and hyperfocus on it shortly before and after a jump. The time in between, as it felt like the universe was unmaking itself, it helped to blink your eyes closed for several seconds. Once reality had reasserted itself, Vasil stood up and marched to the Mechwarrior lounge. Tenica had been badgering him to play cards, and he had been putting it off for weeks. Entering the rec room, Vasil saw Olivia reading something on her tablet while reclining on a couch. Next to her, in the chair, Max was tinkering with what looked like a piece of a BattleMech console. Tenica was sitting at the center conference table, trying to teach the 2 Clan Raven pilots how to play cards. Vasil fought the urge to return to his bunk down in the cargo hold, but Tenica lifted her dark eyes to his and urged him to come sit. "Get in here, we need a 4th, she said with a smile. Vasil grabbed the chair and sat down in it. He pretended not to notice as the 2 ravens stared at him with looks that told him he was in for some interrogation along with the card game. Tenica tossed the cards out, and before Vasil had even a good look at his stack, Washi asked, "Why are you not with the other Jade Falcons? Were you taken as a bondsman?" Vasil looked up at Tenica, and she just smiled and shrugged before looking back at the cards in her hand. His blue eyes tracked down to Washi before he replied, "I was abandoned in Malvina's drive toward Terra. After my unit was destroyed, I heard of what happened in the Ilclan trial, and I made the choice to leave for the place farthest from where anyone could say they were harmed by Malvina's actions." "Are you a mercenary?" Noelle asked, as her nose crinkled up a bit as she was disgusted to even have to ask. Vasil shook his head and said, "I am not being paid. I am here because these are my friends. I am honor-bound to keep them safe." The pair seemed to accept that response, and Tenica took the lead in walking them through the steps of the game. Vasil did his best to focus on the cards, but when he glanced over at the two pilots, he could not help but feel that creeping regret that he had spent so much time trying to escape after losing his Ayasis in the Hell's Horses assault. "Vasil, it's your turn," Tenica repeated herself. Vasil shook his head and tossed his hand to the table. "I fold," he said in his usual flat tone. The Raven pilots picked up the game quickly and seemed to be having fun, though after a few hands it became pretty clear that Noelle and Washi were becoming increasingly competitive with each other. After a particularly heated hand, Washi called Noelle a liar and Vasil grunted with displeasure. Immediately, Washi sat up straight and apologized. Tenica pulled the cards into a central stack and said, "Let's burn off some energy. Training room in 20? "Aff," the two Raven pilots answered nearly in unison. "You too, big guy," Tenica said. 20 minutes later, Tenica walked into the training room wearing her workout gear. Washi and Noelle were there, stretching in their light blue gear, while Vasil stood looking unimpressed by both of them. "All right, who needs their butt kicked first?" Tenica asked as she pounded her fist into her hand. Noelle stepped up and said, "I believe I can prevent that from occurring, ma'am." Both stepped into the practice mat in the middle of the room, and Tenica said, "We're going to need to work on your trash talking." Vasil and Washi watched as the two began to circle and did a few early grapples to try and suss each other out. Vasil saw that Tenica was holding back and not being as aggressive as she could be, which was understandable. The Mechwarrior towered over the aerospace pilot, and there was a considerable difference in muscle mass. However, when Noelle struck forward, deflecting Tenica's restrained punch and driving her shoulder into the Mechwarrior's stomach, it was enough to make Washi cheer. Hitting the ground, Tenica took a pained breath to regain the air knocked out of her by the blow. Noelle was trying to force her forearm up under Tenica's neck to go in for the quick victory, but she was pulled back by Tenica's legs, which had wrapped around the pilot's body and were now squeezing quite hard. Noelle tried to squirm her way out of it, but Tenica was able to lock her ankles and twist the both of them until they were both laying on the mat on their sides. Adapting to the situation quickly, Noelle clenched her fist and drove her elbow deep into Tenica's thigh, which made the Mechwarrior howl in pain and release her grip. Noelle rolled away, both of the fighters now breathing hard with exertion. Noelle lunged forward, seeking to once again use her speed to her advantage. However, this time Tenica saw it coming and spun to the side, grabbing Noelle's arm and flinging her using the pilot's own weight across the ring. The young Raven slammed into the mat with a thud and groan. To her credit, Noelle didn't stay down, quickly scrambling to her feet for another run at Tenica. "That's enough for now, I think. Let's let the guys work off some of their testosterone," Tenica said as she reached out for Noelle. They locked forearms briefly and walked to the edge of the mat. Vasil walked out and looked down at Washi, who looked quite minuscule in comparison to the elemental. They got into their combat stances as Tenica and Noelle grabbed spots on the wall to watch. While obviously this was a mismatch, Vasil let the young pilot demonstrate his skills. They traded a few punches and grappled for a bit. "Keep your hands up. Watch for muscle movement. Most people tense up just before they strike," Vasil said as the Falconer experience kicked in. Tenica smiled, first to herself, then down at Noelle, who was taking in the fight like it was all going to be on a future exam. It was obvious that Vasil needed this, even if he wouldn't admit it. New Explorer Corps. First Arm. 2 jumps from Enif, July 26, 3152. It was heartening to see the comms officers from the 3 ships working so well together. Rin looked over the data being generated through the network of multiple sensor systems, and she was sure that the science team would be head over heels excited when the fleet entered the next unplotted system. She was also relieved that the diagnostics run back on New Samarkand seemed to have finally done away with whatever remnants of bad code were floating around from the previous journey. The last thing she wanted to deal with was trying to explain to the DCMS why their computer systems were suddenly under assault. Captain Tanabe seemed like the sort of person who wouldn't find that very humorous. Their professionalism was impressive, and it didn't put on that air of superiority that so many in the house services had toward anyone who wasn't in their unit. Rin looked over from her command chair to see Corporal Kirsch collaborating with the communications officers from the other 2 jump ships. Of all the junior officers they had recruited from the academy, Kirsch was the one that Rin saw going furthest, the fastest. Back on the main view screen, Rin could watch as the DCMS aerofighters and dropships ran their training maneuvers. The Kikumaru carried 3 Leopard CV dropships, each packed with 6 aerospace fighters. Looking through the shared data, Rin was impressed by the amount of firepower included in what was obviously intended to be a show of force against whatever this last resort periphery state was. The prospect of obtaining the communications and sensor lockdown technology likely factored in as well. A dozen of the fighters were Shallones in the SL-18 configuration, which was not a surprise. The Shallone was a workhorse of the Draconis Combine and had been a successful machine for more than 300 years. The 6 other fighters were comparatively newer Tatsu Omni fighters. The data feed didn't list their configurations, but no matter what they were geared with, it would be a substantial boost if the situation deteriorated. Rin was left with little doubt that the goal was to create such an obvious and overwhelming show of force that Gia, Guider Flores, and whoever they work with will have no choice but to play nice. The thought of seeing that smug look wiped from Gia's face did make Rin momentarily smirk. The flight of aerofighters continued to dance in the choreographed pattern around the Leopard dropships, which were both home base and weapons platforms on their own. Going anywhere near this force was a swift path to an early exit from the mortal plane. Draconis Combine, Sandra 2, Horizon City, January 7th, 3148. You are needed here. You have responsibilities as part of this family, Olivia's father barked at her for what seemed like the 100th time that evening. She stuffed a couple of shirts into her rucksack, closed her eyes, and tried to remain calm before responding, Dad, I can't explain. I just have to go for a while. It's in order to keep you and the family safe. Please trust me. I don't understand. I need you to explain, Micah Mason said as he ran his fingers through his thinning hair. He continued, Does this have something to do with the militia? Your term of service? I thought we handled that with the agricultural hand deferment. No, Dad, Olivia responded as she tossed the rucksack over her shoulder. If I told you, it could cause problems for the family. I will go for a while, but then come back when I can. I've already booked passage. The T-Bolt is already on the dropship. Her father reached out to grab Olivia's arm, stopping her from rushing out the door. She was about to launch into another protest about how she needed to go immediately, but he pulled her close for a hug. After a few seconds, he stepped back and said, Be smart, and come back when you can. We will miss you. I will miss you. Walking out of the house into the pouring rain, Olivia was glad that the crummy weather could conceal her tears. Fresh out of school, her father's connections had gotten her assigned to the local militia along with the family's battle mech. She had taken a lot of crap from her peers over the years for being the daughter of a wealthy politician, and it had hardened her. Training harder, faster, and longer than her classmates, Olivia succeeded where so many other children of officials had failed. When they fell into vice and debauchery, spending their time in clubs and wasting inheritances on vices, Olivia studied. At 18, her first official job was as a junior Mechwarrior in the Horizon militia. It helped, of course, that her family had owned the mech. Olivia did take some ribbing from the other Mechwarriors for not having to work for the position, but she ignored them. It was a rather uneventful job as the Sanda system was far from any frontline duty, and there hadn't been a pirate incursion into the system during her lifetime. Olivia had a reasonable expectation that she would make it through her career without ever having to pilot her Thunderbolt against a living target. Climbing into her truck, Olivia cursed to herself as she started the engine and began to drive to the spaceport. Just 3 hours ago, she had been working on her mech when a series of trucks arrived at the hangar. She watched as several of the Mechwarriors and techs unloaded the boxes of what looked like weapons and ammunition with a forklift. She kept low, next to the mech's shoulder missile launcher, and out of sight as they opened a few crates, examined the rifles and SRM launchers, and then loaded everything into the second truck. Shifting a little bit to get a better look down from the shoulder of the Thunderbolt, one of the techs saw her and waved up. She had little choice but to return the wave and head down to the ground. When she walked up to the group, they were friendly but overly so, and it made Olivia even more suspicious of what she had just witnessed. Playing along, she ended up going out for drinks with two of the Mechwarriors, Syke and Ty, when they extended the invite. This was the first time they ever asked Olivia to join them. The entire evening, it was obvious that they were just trying to sort out if Olivia had any issue with what she saw, or even if she thought anything odd was going on. When their intent became painfully obvious, Olivia leaned forward at the little bar table the three of them were occupying and said, "What's really going on?" Psyche, the most senior of the Mechwarriors, leaned in and spoke in a gruff voice. "We've got a connection that is willing to help supplement our income if we help procure replacement parts from the DCMS pool downtown. All we have to do is put in the orders and then transfer them when they arrive." Olivia leaned back in response. Her suspicions were confirmed, and it was extremely concerning. Stealing from the DCMS was a great way to end up getting executed. "It's important that you be on board. We can make sure you get your fair share," Ty said just before he finished his drink. I'm sorry, but I can't get involved in something like this. I've worked too hard. My family has worked too hard to help me," Olivia said. Both Psyche and Ty bristled at their response. Psyche leaned even further over the table, and his voice took on a much more threatening tone when he said, "We need you on board. We cannot have you growing a conscience and informing on us." Olivia stood up and said, "I'm sorry, I cannot help you." Ty grabbed her arm, yanked her back hard, pulling Olivia down to a knee next to the table. He growled into her ear, "You're gonna regret this." Ty's words were barely out of his mouth before Olivia reacted by grabbing the knife from his boot and hammering it down onto his right hand, which was resting on the table. He groaned in pain and let go of Olivia's arm, giving her the opportunity to sprint for the door. There was shouting and pleas for someone to stop her, but she kept running. She ran all the way back to the base and climbed into the Thunderbolt. No one could harm her in that. No one would dare. Every step of the battlemech down the ferrocrete between the base and the spaceport drew attention. But there was nothing left to do. She had to go. She had to get out of here. End Part 4. Thank you as always for giving the story a go and sticking around as we flesh out some of the characters and move forward. It's good to finally get moving. Remember, the easiest way to support this and other channel creations is hitting that like and subscribe button. If you're able to, channel memberships are a great way to help even more. Ko-Fi people, you rock as always. I appreciate it more than I can properly explain. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.